All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the first brown bag of our fall 2009 series. You all know Dr. Bruce MacMurray, and he'll be sharing with us about forensics. There was a reading. If you had time to glance at, that's great. If you didn't, that's okay too. I just thought we'd have something to kind of set the stage and get us going here. So I'll just turn it over to Bruce at this time. Thank you
very much, Janet. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for Janet for inviting me and for your work with these series over several years. I think it was the Remnant Trust.
Yeah, Remnant Trust was the first.
4 years ago? 5 years ago?
5 years ago, I think.
Like that.
Yeah.
But I've tried to attend as many as I can and appreciate that. I'll presume that few, if any of you, have read the article, which is probably a safe assumption. We operate that way in classes all the time, so why should things be different between colleagues? No. But I would recommend the article to you at some point. I think it's very interesting. And it really pulled together two of my strong interests in two kinds of related areas in terms of criminal justice and science. And I will probably get off a little bit on a rant, or in terms of some sense of part of where the problems got us to where we are, I think, historically, in terms of those two kinds of approaches and trying to reconcile them in terms of pursuits of knowledge and understanding. Let me start at a far more mundane place, however. Television shows 21st century America. CSI. Ever heard of it? Ever admit to watching it? What does it tell us about
instantaneous results? And there should be no
instantaneous
bad
results?
On the street.
No bad criminals on the street?
Science is infallible.
Science is infallible.
You can do a DNA test in 5 minutes.
You can do a DNA test in 5 minutes.
Seems like there's unlimited resources.
Unlimited resources. Okay. And yet you're all chuckling. I take these remarks not to be serious, or not to be a sense in terms of what you take to be the reality of how criminal justice and science operate in the real world. Yes? Important point, and yet the kind of segue to that in terms of where we want to go is it certainly is not a clearly classified phenomenon, and yet if you talk to lawyers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, there has come a kind of concern generally throughout their practice about what's known as the CSI effect, and the effect that CSI has in a very real kind of sense in terms of how it plays out in terms of criminal justice cases. And although, again, it's not kind of pinned down to one author, and so it's a little loose, basically the CSI effect is regarded to be the fact that if a prosecutor is able to present some forensics evidence, something related to DNA, related to fingerprint analysis, fiber analysis, etc., and it is relatively convincing, left in quotes, that significantly strengthens the prosecutor's case. And I would say that's the general kind of tendency in terms of how that effect is seen. There's some sense, mostly what prosecutors have some concerns about, that if they don't present any such evidence in terms of criminal cases, it may be seen to artificially weaken their case or lay credibility to the defense, because where is the DNA, where are the fabulous actors, where are the kind of computer screens that demonstrate all the evidence that provides a kind of slam dunk in terms of that kind of sense. And again, I think that kind of context is important to keep in mind in terms of what we can kind of joke about in terms of a television show which we know is fiction. It doesn't provide a real portrayal in terms of how criminal justice works, and yet real concerns that those who operate within the criminal justice have about the kind of spillover effect that may have in terms of how the system operates, and particularly in a system like ours that relies upon a jury system, a system of peers, of non-professionals who ultimately, in many trial cases, make decisions about guilt and innocence, that may kind of cloud up their sense of what's really taking place in those cases, in those situations. Okay? And so the main focus in terms of this article, which is actually based upon a National Academy of Sciences report that I'll get into in more detail in a minute or so, really focuses on a couple basic kinds of things. First of all, what's the appropriate role for forensics analysis in evidence? What's the kind of role that forensics should play and the analysis of that evidence should play in terms of the criminal justice process, in terms of cases that move forward? Second, what kind of problems, what kind of issues are raised in terms of that kind of use of evidence in those kind of cases? What are the kind of troublesome points? And that's really the major focus in terms of the article. And then ultimately, given some kind of problems that exist, what reforms or improvements may be beneficial to better improve the interests of justice? How can we make the system better once we recognize these kind of problems? I'll come back to some basics, but the National Academy of Sciences report was issued in February of this year, 2009, and based upon authorization from a bill from Congress in 2005 that was interested about kind of the situation in terms of forensics and some of these kind of questions and these kind of issues. Basics, what is forensic science? What is forensics evidence? And the minute I start to tell you a sense of what those kind of issues deal with, you'll get a sense for the basic overview in terms of the problems. Forensics evidence basically is anything which is produced via one or more of a broad range of forensic science disciplines. So any kind of evidence, any kind of information which is gained through the process of forensic sciences would be seen as forensics evidence. Forensic science disciplines, based upon a 2006 report issued by the National Institute of Justice, boils down to 12 kind of areas. General toxicology, the evaluation in terms of chemicals, body chemistry, particularly in terms of cases related to death, the passing over the summer of Michael Jackson and the toxicology report related to the cause of death, in terms of medical examiner coroner, a recent kind of example in terms of those kind of issues. Firearms and tool marks, in terms of markings in terms of left at the scene or left in terms of victims, how those match up with the firearms that are used, if it's the use of a firearm in terms of bullets, or in terms of objects that might have been used in terms of assaults or homicides along those kind of lines as well. Document verification, trace evidence, which simply relates to any kind of pieces of, again, could be fiber, could be blood, could be tire tracks, anything which is left as a trace from a crime scene. Controlled substances, what we think of in terms of illegal drugs, biological, serology, screening, including DNA analysis, fire debris, arson analysis, impression evidence, blood pattern analysis, crime scene investigation, medical legal death investigation, and digital evidence. And part of the problem that the Academy had was, and sees as a major issue in this area, is the wide kind of birth that exists in terms of these kind of areas. The fact that there is tremendous diversity in terms of those kind of areas. And basically the reality that where it is that practitioners within those fields lie, in terms of areas of expertise, differ significantly, different greatly. If DNA sounds like the main one that you're familiar with, the main one that you think of, that's probably a good thing, because that's what most prosecutors, defense attorneys, and judges would regard as a kind of quote-unquote gold standard, so the kind of main standard in terms of that kind of evidence. And in a curious kind of way, DNA evidence which has been used by agents within the criminal justice system in terms of appropriately trying to figure out the problem of individualization, the match between an offender or an accused offender and, in mystery terms, did he do it or did she do it under those circumstances. DNA evidence has also been able to exonerate many individuals who have now been shown to be falsely accused, and to, in effect, show some of the problems or some of the troubles related to some of these other areas in terms of forensics evidence. So a large part of what I'll talk about will not relate to DNA, and DNA really is what raises some of the issues in terms of these kind of concerns or in terms of these kind of issues. The article's title, Examining Forensics, Are New Research and Oversight Needed? The Academy report raises a number of issues about forensic sciences and their implementation within the criminal justice system, and then offers 13 recommendations at the end. I'm simply going to provide a quick overview in terms of those kind of issues, and so we won't get to all of those by any means. Again, I would refer you to the full National Academy of Sciences report if you want further information, and I can give you the website address about that when we're done. Let me start with a quote from the Academy report, page 4, under the section, Challenges Facing the Forensic Science Community. Again, I quote, "For decades, the forensic science disciplines have produced valuable evidence that has contributed to the successful prosecution and conviction of criminals, as well as to the exoneration of innocent people. Over the last 2 decades, advances in some forensic science disciplines, especially the use of DNA technology, have demonstrated that some areas of forensic science have great additional potential to help law enforcement identify criminals. Many crimes that may have gone unsolved are now solved because forensic science is helping to identify